Arsenal fans are saying they need a striker, specifically Ivan Toney. And he is an unbelievable player. However, he might not be what Arsenal need to win the league. And here's why. Firstly, let's look at why Arsenal fans want Toney. The simple answer is, Arsenal don't score enough goals, and Toney scores a lot of goals. Well, let's see if that's true. Toney would be a Jesus replacement. Toney scored 20 goals last season, Jesus scored 11. So that's an improvement, right? Well, not really. 6 of Toney's goals were penalties, and Jesus was injured for a lot of the season. You could argue that that's a good thing, and that Arsenal need a new penalty taker, but we'll come on to that later. Last season, Gabriel Jesus scored 0.44 non-penalty goals per 90 minutes, while Ivan Toney scored 0.43. But, being an Arsenal player, Jesus gets better service. Jesus underperformed his XG by 0.14 per 90, which basically means he's not scoring as many goals as he should. And Ivan Toney overperformed, which means he's scoring more goals than he's expected to. So how many goals would Toney score if he played for Arsenal? Toney would have about 19.14 XG worth of chances over the course of a season, and he would outperform it by 0.64, meaning he'd have about 90 to 20 non-penalty goals, while Jesus would have about 14 to 15 if he's fully fit, which is only a 5-goal increase every season. Saka converts 1 in 5 penalties every season, while Toney converts 1 in 14 to 15. So surely that means if Arsenal sign Toney, they'll score 6 more goals a season. Except that's not really true. When you think of a striker, you might think of a finisher, someone that stays in the box and finishes chances. And a lot of normal managers want that to be their striker, but Arteta isn't like other managers. Arsenal tried to get their wingers into 1v1s, so they can cut it back for Havertz and Odegaard to score. So, if Arsenal's midfielders are supposed to be the goal scorers, then what does Jesus do? Jesus is one of the best strikers in the world at linking play. So he might not be very good at finishing, but he's a very good creator, like Firmino. So, if Toney came into the team, then he wouldn't be able to create as much as Jesus. Arteta would have to change how his team plays, and it would all be very difficult. So it might look like Arsenal will get 6 more goals a season if they sign Toney, but in reality, Jesus' contribution outside of the penalty box causes a lot more goals. We can't measure how many goals Arsenal have scored from Jesus' creativity, but let's just say the answer is 0. And just think. Ignoring Jesus' creativity, Arsenal gets 6 more goals a season from Ivan Toney. Now think Ivan Toney would cost £100 million for 6 goals a season. Now remember that Ivan Toney hasn't played football in half a year, so he probably would have lost quality. And the final reason I think Arsenal shouldn't buy Ivan Toney is that they've got no money. Remember when they tried to sign Raya from Brentford, and they had to loan him with an option to buy? They did this because Raya was £40 million, and they weren't allowed to buy him because of financial fair play. They were spending too much money, with signings on Havertz and Rice. So not only Toney wouldn't be worth £100 million, they wouldn't even be able to sign him, unless they sell another player. But who would they sell? Every Arsenal player is so important to their system, including Gabriel Jesus, which means if they sell one, their whole team would have to change, and that would take a lot of getting used to. They would have to sell the likes of Ramsdale, Smith Rowe, and maybe Reece Nelson, and they still might not be able to afford him. So, how could you fix Arsenal in the January transfer window? I have done a video on a transfer for every Premier League team, and I chose Serhou Guirassy for Arsenal, partly because he was a lot cheaper than the alternative. He has a release clause of around £15 million and can be used against teams that want to sit back, where Jesus isn't needed as much in build-up. Gabriel Jesus can still be important to link play in some games, and they can use his creativity to make chances. Whereas in other games, teams just sit back, and that has been Arsenal's main problem this season. They don't have a striker to bang in goals when they do that. When teams sit back against Manchester City, they just give the ball to the best crosser in the world, so he can give it to one of the best finishers in the world, and they can score like that. Whereas with Arsenal, they can try to give it to Jesus, but he's probably not going to score. Not because he's not good, just because it's not really his game. So let's say Arsenal sign Guirassy. In some games, if the opponent sits back against them, they can always have Guirassy in the box getting subbed on for Jesus, so he can finish off chances given to him. Whereas if they don't sit back against them, then they can just carry on using Jesus. Being able to change their style of play just from one substitution can be so crucial, as it means they can play against basically anyone. Now, you might be wondering why I chose Guirassy and said no to Toney, and the answer is simple. Guirassy's a better goal scorer than Toney, and he's cheaper. £85 million cheaper. That's why I think Arsenal should not sign Toney and why they should sign Guirassy. What do you think? And who do you think is going to win the league this year? One more thing, I do think that Ivan Toney is an unbelievable striker. I just don't think he should go to Arsenal right now.